All right, we're back with episode 3, reviewing Efap 248, talking to Your Movie Sucks about his criticism of The Critical Drinker. We're about an hour and 28 into the video, and just something funny I noticed. I thought that YMS's logo here was a camel, but after looking at some of the some chat, it's actually a horse. So not a camel, that is in fact a horse. That's probably the most important takeaway from this video, I think. So we're just going to get back into the murky depths and do some reaction.
Completely fucked.
Okay.
Right. I don't disagree with that. I'm when the again, the title is, why modern movies suck, not why, studio movies suck. And, I'm glad that he is recommending things like Boiling Point. I've yet to see it, but I'm excited to watch it. I feel like
I think
will
you'll love
enjoy
it.
that movie because I know enough about it that, I have my own tools that I can use to determine whether or not I think a movie will be like pretty good.
Yeah, so YMS thinks it's a good thing that Critical Drinker is recommending Boiling Point, which isn't really a mainstream film. They talk so highly about it in this podcast that I added it to my list of things to watch. So,
I think that it's important not just to criticize Disney and criticize big studio movies, but I think it's important to move away from feeling obligated that we even need to be talking about them. The problem with Star Wars is that it's so big that people feel obligated to watch it to be a part of a cultural conversation, whether or not they think they're even going to enjoy it. I want to end that shit. I want people to be as excited for the new fucking Jim Cummings movie. I want people to be looking at artists created. I want people to know about Matt Johnson. I want people to be fucking hyped.
no idea who Matt Johnson is. So, point made, YMS. But what he's getting at, and I agree with it to a certain extent, is that giving attention to these IPs, these movies, these Disney movies that are absolutely terrible is keeping them alive. And that sometimes the best way to end an issue is to just stop giving it any attention entirely. Kind of like, like they say that one kid in class who's just like, oh, he's just doing it for the attention. And then you stop giving him attention and they stop doing it. His point is basically just let's stop giving all this attention to these big movies, these big, in quotation mark, franchises that don't deserve it, that are obviously writing's bad and all that, and maybe start putting all that attention into smaller ones. And I think his main issue is like the obligation that people feel like in order to be part of the cultural conversation, they have to go see these movies, even though they're bad, and everyone knows they're going to be bad. That's his point there. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that's there's a lot of people, they call it black-pilled, where they're just like, I'm done with this franchise. I'm not going to watch another thing from them. I know a lot of people are like that with Star Wars and other franchises where, after the Jango Fett series or after maybe the new trilogy, they're just like, I'm completely done with Star Wars. I'm never going to watch another Star Wars movie again. And maybe that's the right approach. I mean, obviously, a lot of people have taken on that approach. And so that's kind of his viewpoint. And I'm sure it seems like Mueller is going to give his opinion on I'm sure the gray area that is in between completely ignoring a franchise and then trying to address the issues and maybe point out the flaws and get the franchise to steer back in the right direction.
for the new Nirvana the band movie, right? And stop thinking that like, oh yeah, because it says Marvel on it or Star Wars on it, that we all have to talk about it, we all have to see it. Like, why the fuck did anybody watch She-Hulk? Like, nobody should have even
I can
watched
explain that.
even
We
to
watched
like
it.
criticize it. You know, it's just like it's
So,
just
well, to clarify,
I
right,
wish that people didn't feel obligated. You
No,
know,
I know, but that's very much wishful thinking. In a lot of people, and they're going to be in both of our chats right now, they have fallen
Yeah.
in love with these IPs, and it makes them feel, inspired, or it makes them feel any particular way.
That's how they got you. That's
Yeah,
how they got you. You gotta.
but you say
Not
that
bad
you gotta
to
break away from
inspire
yeah, you
people.
you
That's
say
not a
that as
bad
though
thing, right?
like a new version or a new iteration.
The irony here is that usually you would expect Mahler to be the more cynical one here, but it's actually YMS being cynical. I don't know why I said that. It's actually YMS being cynical here. So he's saying that you've fallen in love with these franchises. Mahler's saying you've fallen in love with these franchises and you're invested in them and you want them to get better. So you're going to criticize them. You're going to try to point out the flaws, make a big deal about it. So the studios realize that that's how people feel, and a change happens. Where YMS is saying it's too far gone. You're deluding yourself. You're being delusional if you think that you can turn these studios around. And so it's almost like Mahler has like, oh, we can still have an impact. We can still make a difference. And YMS is going, no. Now, the only thing that I would kind of want to kind of further this discussion would be for a little bit more specificity. I don't even know what to say. I would like it to be a little bit more, like I'd like some examples of franchises that are so far gone, there's nothing you can do. And then maybe some franchises that aren't completely gone and they kind of flip-flop. They put out something good, they put out something bad, they put out something good. I know a lot of people were pleasantly surprised with the House of the Dragon Game of Thrones franchise, the newest season for that. And a lot of people really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. Look forward to the next season. So maybe, a lot of people were ready to black pill or write off Game of Thrones after the horrendous ending of their first season. Just god awful. I don't think anyone would disagree. And whether that was, maybe they just ran out of time, maybe because they went off the books, they no longer had the source material to base their episodes on. Whatever the excuse was, it was inexcusable and absolutely terrible. But so a lot of people were ready to just count Game of Thrones out. They said this is over, they're not going to recover from this. And then they came out with House of Dragon, which was really well done, a lot of passion into it, well filmed, good effects, good characters, good writing, all that good stuff. So that was a good franchise versus something, I don't know, like I guess Disney Marvel, which I guess they feel like it's too far gone. They're too formulaic. They're too stuck in a rut. There's no way they can pull this around. So that's the only thing I would like, a little bit, like I said, a little bit more kind of specifics as to which franchises are completely gone and forgotten about, and which ones still have the ability to, with fan critique, to right the ship.
Wouldn't be equally as fulfilling. That does happen. Every once in a while, we do get a new version of a particular IP that is incredible, and that's what everybody wants, but we don't get it. And so what's Drinker doing, what's many people doing? We're trying to be critical of it, to push it back. To
Critical Drinker being critical. That's a novel thought.
Get it in a different direction. When
I think that's a lost cause in the same way that like trying to get Halo to the industry is just so fucked.
That's a good one. I don't think Halo's ever going to come back. Unfortunately, if you ever played the original Halo games, some of the best games ever made. I would argue up to 3. Some people say to Reach. Some people maybe further than that. Not many people, but the Halo franchise, whatever passion that was put into that original franchise, that lightning in the bottle, I think most people agree that it's gone. The newest Halo game, Halo Infinite, I played it a little bit. It wasn't terrible. And if you've never played a Halo game before, I'm sure you probably really enjoyed it. Like, you know, if you're a kid growing up playing it. But I think a lot of us that, you know, I don't want to get into this like, oh, the past was better, but in some instances I think it was. And for Halo in particular, I think the older Halo franchises were much better. And I think YMS is giving that as an example. Like, I was just asking for specifics. I think he's using that as a specific example of a franchise that's too far gone. Even though it's not a movie franchise, it's a video game franchise, but still.
I think it's much more important and much more like strategic to just support independent artists that are making the good things.
I don't see why we can't do
you
both.
know, like you don't.
Yeah, Disney's
Well,
already
I don't
said
know,
they're
'cause,
scaling
like,
back the amount of
you-
projects and the budgets
do
of these
you want
projects.
more
So isn't that
sequels?
a move in the right
Like-
direction?
I
I thought we
Good.
were all supposed to not like. I thought we're all like sick of the whole sequelitis. Like when somebody announces
they're
something, it's like,
bad.
do we really need like a? Yeah, exactly. If they're bad, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
For me, the things that I love, like, I'm happy with the existing properties. I don't need a fucking Lion King 4. Like
Absolutely,
I
no,
can
I'm
just
with
watch
you.
the
I-
original
But
because I
when-
love
but mean,
the original.
If you wanted to
I-
focus in on like, even if we wanted to keep talking about Disney used to like make like original films before they started
Well,
making
I just-
sequels all the time,
to give it
or at the very least,
Yeah,
it's
it's bullshit.
adaptations of older, like fantasy stories.
Yeah, I like the idea that you can do both. You can criticize the media that you enjoy, and you can also invest more into new media and undiscovered media that is more worthy of your attention and time. I'm sure there's some kind of balance, maybe like don't spend all your time watching media you hate, and then also like discover some new stuff. But also maybe if you feel like your opinion might make a difference, maybe join in on a cause that you can support that maybe will hopefully. Because if I remember correctly, I think the Star Wars second trilogy they were supposed to have another couple movies, like Rian Johnson was going to be able to direct another trilogy or something like that, and that either got scrapped or that got pushed to the back burner because I think of backlash. I could be wrong on that, but so that could be an example of where criticism helped kind of stop the destruction of an IP, for lack of a better term, and then maybe they get a director who actually cares about the franchise and has the right tools in place, and maybe they do a better version of it.
And things like that. So you could always say, well, I mean, by talking about this, I'm trying to nudge Disney in the direction of not franchising every single thing that they have, and to go back.
Yeah,
to
but
making, Lightyear fails. Maybe
talking
that
does
means that
nothing.
Pixar could- Well, I mean, it has to be
Talking does
something,
nothing.
right?
The box office
Talking can
numbers
lead.
do something.
Talking can
Talking
lead
leads
to
to-
behaviors.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
that's the whole
perhaps.
point of
You
your
would- I mean, you
channel.
would
No,
have-
no,
you
not
would have
perhaps.
to-
That's what you've
Well-
been saying that you're trying to do, right?
I mean, you would.
Well, I mean, I'm
you would have
talking
to
about
accept
like. No, I mean 100% talking does lead to behaviors. I'm just saying like the scope of like what makes a Disney movie make or break is
Okay, but
seems
so to give you an
not be
example,
heavily influenced
when,
by online
when-
commentary.
When TLJ happened and Rise of Skywalker, you'll find plenty of sentiment throughout all of our sphere of YouTube about Star Wars needs to stop.
Mhm.
Go away, just stop, it's done, leave it alone, it's dead, just stop. They bring out
Yeah.
Andor, we talk about how this is a bad idea, it's gonna be shit, there's no point. We watch it, it's really good. We fully recommend it to people, and people are very happy with it. It's very much an inspiration.
Didn't see Andor. I heard it was a more gritty version of the Star Wars in the Star Wars universe, and it seems like the Efap guys really like it. I am also a little bit burned out on Star Wars. I think the last thing I watched was the Kenobi series, the second season of Mandalorian. I skipped the Book of Boba Fett, which thank God, because even my buddy who's a diehard Star Wars fan, even he said that was absolutely terrible, which is surprising because he's never said a bad thing about it. He liked pretty much all the Star Wars media up to that point. So that might have saved me. But after the Kenobi series and then after Mandalorian season 2, which wasn't terrible, it was all right. I'd still watch season 3 if it came out. it's not, but there were some episodes that I thought fell flat, and that kind of started giving me a little burnout on the series. But the
show, and it's easy to get into for a lot of people because it's Star Wars. I don't like. I'm not like sad that happened because we can't like accelerate on the whole hating of IPs. I'm actually really happy that they managed to find someone to give this project to, and they give him enough freedom to make something good. And we want to encourage more of that to happen in future. And how else do you do it but saying, "Look at that, it's good. Go look at that." That's, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but what we are doing essentially through internet commentary is essentially just a hyper extension of what exists as word of mouth, right? And so word of mouth can, that's existed
That's great though, right?
throughout time. Oh yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah, I think we've kind of lost the plot of what we're even arguing about right now.
No,
So
we're
should
totally
just
on point,
continue.
because I was about to bring it back to Drinker.
Okay,
like,
sorry.
he's doing all of these kinds of discussions. He's talking to well-known actors or even directors. He's talking about the different films that are good or bad from, obviously, his own paradigm, but at the same time, clearly appeals to a lot of people's points of view in the hopes that something can be done, even if it is in a small way.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, Drinker is a independent guy. He doesn't have like millions of dollars backing him up. He kind of just him recording and making videos. And the fact that he's able to get to the point where he's speaking to high profile people and directors and have such a large audience, I'd imagine like people notice that, and maybe that kind of changes public opinion. And like I said, I think YMS is being a little bit more cynical here. And I understand where that viewpoint, because there's a lot of people that feel very powerless, and it's just like, well, what can one person do? But there are movements, and there is that thing that happens when you get enough people that agree with you, that change can actually occur. But it also takes a certain level of belief in something that happens, and then that can happen, and then sometimes it never comes to fruition. And so I see both sides here,
right? Like, I'm not particularly moved by if like a wizard told me you're gonna make zero difference, except maybe one guy in your audience might be inspired to make a good movie someday, I'd be like, that's good enough. That's all I need.
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, a lot of us, don't believe that, but for guys like this, I could see them, that could be a really good motivation, that they think that if they're just inspiring one or two people out of the hundreds of thousands or millions of views that they get, to do something good, then I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And I assume, you'd
I
have to be
do
the same,
too.
right? Like, you've inspired loads of people.
Exactly.
And I just love how Mauler and the other Efap guys are constantly like showing how much they respect YMS. They constantly are letting them know how much they support his message, how inspiring they think he is, and how good his content is. And the EFAP guys, whenever they get somebody on who they disagree with, or they don't feel like put effort into their work, or they don't feel like is doing a good job, they're very critical. They cut right into them. And to hear them praise YMS throughout the podcast, really, despite having disagreements here and there, just goes to show you that they really do like the guy, and they I guess they also respect him to a certain and I think the respect is mutual. I think YMS does respect the EFAP guys as well. That's again why this is such an interesting and good podcast.
And I feel like
so.
we're all doing what we can. Like, the issue I take with is people who either like lie about media to push their own preferences necessarily, or that are just giving analysis that's absolutely fucking worthless, like absolutely shallow. Now, if you had that opinion of Drinker, I'm not saying you do at all, I wouldn't even like take issue with it until I see what examples you have, because I don't know what you would have seen, that sort of thing. I would entertain the idea in the
Okay.
same way that I hope you'd entertain the idea if I had that opinion about any given reviewer online. But I feel like we do good work, both you and myself and Drinker. And Rags of Fringy, of course.
Hello.
Can't forget Rags and Fringy. They're here too.
70s music. You don't think of every single song that existed in the 70s that you heard on the radio. You think of, the songs that still hold true to this day. Like, I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? Like, what is that? CCR
Good
clear?
singing.
I don't remember. the
Yeah,
band's
that's
name.
great.
There's
This is
certain
copyright
things that
warning.
stand the test of time. I think that it's kind of a weird bias that human beings have in terms of how we
I love that song. I don't know if you can tell by the beard or whatever, but great song. Good taste in music.
think about media, where Creedence Clearwater Revival, that's such a long mouthful of a name. It's such an interesting weird bias that we have about media, where we think,
YourMovieSucks.org.
like, all music sucks now, or all
YMS, isn't it?
yeah.
I was smiling because I remembered that joke and I thought that was pretty funny. The irony that he's in the video with a straight face saying that it's a long title for a band, and his channel is YourMovieSucks.org. It's like the same amount of words.
Got him.
Oh, and sorry, I did mean to
Owned with facts and logic.
ask. It was.
I'm trying to change my channel name to just YMS, but I got to figure out if I'll lose my my check mark if I do that. I'm trying to figure out if I
On
can.
YouTube?
Because I got the @ yeah.
So
I already have the @ YMS
so that's
URL.
like that's what
thing.
shows up when you comment on a thing. It's at YMS.
This is the tech support part of the podcast where these guys talk about the ins and outs of being a YouTube creator and commenter. Very, very unrelated, but
Yeah, but then you go to the channel and then it's
And it's a
whole
different
fucking
name.
jumble of shit.
Yeah, like
I
oh, is
created
this
the
Louis
channel
Crossman?
back when
No,
it
it's
was like
Mustang. Yeah.
I created the channel when it was normal to have a website.
I was going to ask out of curiosity, because you did seem adamant that like we should be moving away from the mainstream stuff. Like you do cover a lot of it, though, right?
Okay, let's look at my channel for a second here. All right. So I did Barbenheimer, obviously. That's like a big event sort of thing that I'm interested in. Asteroid City and Past Lives was my one before that. I would, Wes Anderson's pretty big. Past Lives was an indie film from Sundance. The way that I cover videos at this point, like, it has to be there has to be a certain threshold that's held in terms of I'm not just gonna watch and or cover a movie just because it's popular and just because I know I'll get clicks and just because even if there's a billion people asking me to.
I think if you just look at his like most recent videos, it does have Barbenheimer on there. I think it also has Little Mermaid. I think it has something else. So he does review topical and popular movies, just not as much as the other guys. And like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, they're entertaining. Everyone's talking about it. He doesn't do particularly long videos on it, so he's not really contradicting himself. I mean, he's not investing a ton of time into it. He's just kind of, and I believe that there are videos that he genuinely took an interest in. Like he just didn't do it because he felt like he had to, based off of what he's saying. He did it because he thought that it would be fun to talk about, or maybe he had some good points in there. But I also, with that logic, is it so hard to believe that maybe Critical Drinker or Efap to that would also do all this because they're genuinely interested in it and they don't feel necessarily obligated to cover these things? I guess he's skeptical from his point of view because it seems like every single new giant movie that comes out, there's a video for it. So the fact that they're not taking breaks between videos implies that there is an obligation to it. But maybe that's just what they're interested in. Maybe they're just interested in the most topical and big names, and that's the way of reaching the widest audience, and that's what they value. And Just something to think about.
It has to be something that I either A, think I'm going to enjoy, B, think I'm going to enjoy ironically, or C, know that I have some sort of passionate conversation about, hopefully accurately before I see the movie. I inferred enough from the Little Mermaid trailers, and I also wanted an excuse to rewatch the original, and I wanted to do like a comparison. So I don't know. To me, yeah, there's it depends. It depends on what month it is, because I'm in the middle of making my Fantasia Festival review. That's 12 random film festival movies that are going to be dropped in the next like week. A month from now, it's going to be like 30 movies from TIFF, which are all festival movies. So, out of all the major film review channels, I'd say that I probably do the best job in terms of like covering smaller films. Like, that's the reason why Fantasia invited me back to their festival. They gave me a fucking hotel room. That was pretty cool. Is because I'm helping to like really promote these things, and I
A little bit, comes off as a little bit egotistical there. That's why Fantasia invited me back, and I think I'm doing the best job, and I can see how that rubs people the wrong way. But from what he's saying, it seems like he earned it, and it's well deserved. Just some people don't like to hear you talk about the things you earned. And if you're not familiar with him and you're not kind of, you're not taking his word for everything, then I could see why you would think that he's coming off a little arrogant here. But I'm sure the people that are familiar with him knows that what he's saying is true, and that he's not really bragging about it.
I think that with my goal being sharing smaller things that hopefully everybody enjoys, or enough people enjoy or can connect with, that they wouldn't have found without me, part of that goal is having channel growth, which unfortunately, people click on things they're familiar with.
Yeah,
right?
By every one of these points you've made, I completely agree. Obviously the only thing is that it would still further interest and attention to the mainstream movies, right? Like it would damage your overall goal of trying to ignore and move past them if you're going to continue to cover them.
Yeah, but I don't cover it. That makes up such a smaller percentage of like the content on my channel, right? There's movies that I literally like, people are asking me to fucking cover Elvis. I'm like, I'll only do it if it gets nominated for an Oscar, right? And I did, because
you could think about it like this too. Even though this is just kind of like a funny side point, maybe not even funny, it's just a little side point. Even though the majority of his videos, from what he's saying, is covering independent movies, small independent movies, it's possible that the majority of his views are from his videos covering major movies. And I don't necessarily think he would disagree with that. I think his kind of logic is use the big movies and the reviews to get people to go to his channel and look at some of the smaller stuff. That's kind of his like marketing strategy, almost, to help him reach his goal of having the most people be exposed to new media that he thinks is actually worth your time. So and then when he's in his downtime, when he's not doing media for those important movies that he wants to share, he works on the big. He puts a little bit of effort into the bigger franchises, and essentially that's kind of how he gets attention. Now, whether or not you agree with that methodology for helping to grow his audience to help push his goal, I'm sure you can disagree with that, but it is an interesting way of going about it. I think it's kind of smart, but at the same time, Mahler and Efap could argue that even though a minority, and I don't know this for a fact, I'm just assuming this, a minority of the videos make up a majority of his overall viewership, or overall views, I should say, not his viewership. So like the really popular videos, Lion King, Little Mermaid, Barbieheimer, the views on those videos are significantly more than the views on the videos where he's covering smaller stuff, which makes sense. And I think maybe he does address it, but let's see.
It was part of my Oscars video. I like covering the Oscars. I like clowning on the Oscars. It's a good series. But yeah, like I didn't, there's a gigantic handful of like Disney remakes that, probably could have made content out of, but they just didn't seem that interesting. I didn't see Mulan. I had no interest in
You'd have hated
seeing
it.
it or trying to cover it. Most Star Wars movies, like I only saw 7.
And that's going back to what I was saying, where he doesn't cover every single new release, and that the point I think he's making, that it's suspicious that Drinkers covers every single major movie release, and that maybe that's out of obligation to cover it, and that obligation is help fueling these movies, these franchises to stay alive. Although the counterpoint would be that he's bringing negative attention to the bad ones and good attention to the good ones, and therefore the negative attention isn't really keeping it alive. It's more so like an investment in the long run to kind of reduce viewership in the future, especially if he does it well. So that's a little bit of both side-isms there.
7 through 9 because I felt obligated out of like this whole cultural conversation thing, which is exactly what I'm trying to move away from. And so I'm like, okay, well now I'm not just watching Star Wars things because people are wanting me to talk about Star Wars things. Like I think I'm pretty firm in my belief that it's not my type of media to be consuming, right? So yeah, I would say there's like a healthy mix on my channel. Like it's completely unavoidable to it's not possible for a channel to not talk about a popular movie, because like even if you talk about an indie movie at a festival, there's a chance that it will become popular, like The Whale, like
Yeah.
The other thing that I'd kind of like to entertain is the idea that a lot of these new movies that the Drinker and Efap cover are remakes, and you could say that the Efap and the Drinker have spent a lot of time in these franchises, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, I guess even Marvel to a certain extent, and they're almost like experts on the subject, and they are kind of giving like expert criticism on it, versus and they enjoy doing that because they are so familiar with the franchises. And so that's kind of another way to look at it.
Yeah.
Films that blow up. So yeah, I don't think that my the overall landscape of my channel is contradictory to what I'm saying or what my goals are.
I
What
wasn't going
my
to describe it as
outlook is.
contradictory. It's more so that
No.
it's going to have a byproduct that's unfortunate considering your goals, I'd assume.
Well, I waited like a long time before I even made my Lion King review. Like my stance on the Lion King 2019 was, don't watch it, don't even watch it ironically, stop asking me to see it, don't give them money, because like I fucking care about, the Lion King is like one of my favorite movies ever. And I love the original so much, and I didn't want to incentivize Disney to make more. And my suggestion for people not to do that didn't make a fucking difference. It made $1 billion right away. It became the highest grossing animated film of all time, only to be beaten by the Mario movie this year.
Why do you think? Do you think there's a reason why Disney films aren't making as much money anymore compared to 4 or 5 years ago, where like they were, dominating 6, 7, 8 out of the top 10 highest grossing films of all time? What do you think changed?
Fatigue. People are seeing more of the same shit. It's not art anymore. You're not showing people a new experience. I think that there's enough people that like, if you polled people coming out of the fucking theater, like which is what CinemaScore does, which, I don't think that they're like a great website in terms of how to find good movies. But let's see what the CinemaScore Lion King 2019 was, because the general. Do they even have it? Okay, I'm just.
This is also a part of the podcast that really stuck with me. It's a 9-hour podcast, and you're not going to remember every little detail, but this moment did kind of stick with me. And they're talking about why did you think that the Disney movies went from making up a majority of the top movies to no longer, whatever Frank you said, I think he said like 6 of the top 8 or something like that, and now they're none of them are in the top 8. And YMS's response is fatigue, and Efap is going to push back a little bit and say, well, it's not just the fatigue, it's also that they're really bad movies. And YMS is going to respond, I think, if I remember correctly, he's going to kind of go, well, the Western genre, like every genre eventually dies out. Western genre, mob movies, and over time people just get tired of that, and the industry kind of burns itself out, and you kind of milk that whole idea dry, and there's really not much else you can do with it. But I think it is a combination of the two things. I think people do get fatigued of the same idea over and over again. Obviously, it's not the same idea, but like pretty much the same premise over and over again. But at the same time, making movies like with objectively bad writing, objectively bad characters will increase the speed that the audience is getting fatigued. So yes, fatigue does play a factor. It would be like, you like steak or something like that, and you eat like, let's say you eat like 20 steaks. You're not going to enjoy steak number 1920 as much as you enjoyed steaks 1 through 5 or something like that. But what wouldn't help is if the steaks kept getting like worse and worse quality as you got closer to steak 20. So you might, instead of like being able to get to like steak 11 or 12 and being like, okay, I'm done with this, I'm fatigued. And obviously everybody's fatigue point is going to be different. Maybe some people get to steak 14, maybe some people stop at steak 2. But instead of like the majority of people stopping at steak 10 or 11, if the steak qualities kept getting worse and worse with each additional steak, you might get fatigued a lot sooner. So maybe instead of making it to steak 11, 12, you're making it to steak 6 or 7. And to kind of bring that back to the whole movie analogy, which with each superhero, Marvel, cookie cutter, factory assembly line type movie that comes out, people get kind of more and more like tired. They want to push the bounds, kind of like what YMS was saying with like what art is. They want new creative ideas. With each additional one of those movies, people get tired, but those movies being terrible make people get tired a lot quicker. And obviously there are exceptions, maybe after a bunch of really bad movies, you get a really good one, and that kind of like revitalizes people a little bit. But then unless it's like a consistent thing that changes, it's not going to change people's mind in the long run, if there's not enough good examples that outweigh the bad examples. But yeah, I think this is that's essentially kind of laying the groundwork for the discussion they're going to have. Essentially, why why are people being fatigued of the Disney Marvel right now? And they're going to go back and forth. Is it bad writing? Is it the movies are bad? Is it because there's too much of it out there? And like I said, I think it's a little bit of combination of both. I think it being bad and being too much of it out there is like, it's causing people to fatigue at a lot faster rate than if it was all good content. And it was, even if it was still being kind of repetitive.
I'm going to have to search for it better. The general consensus that my understanding of the general consensus of The Lion King 2019 is that people fucking liked it, right? Like it wasn't like people liked the movie, but now when it's like, okay, you're doing the same shit over and over again, first film critics are going to notice. First people who watch like a huge variety of films and have seen so many that it's already like, okay, you're kind of doing the same thing again already. If they've seen it once or twice, then there's a certain portion of the population that's going to be like, okay, come off it. I already know what's happening. But then the more times it's done, then the more of a percentage of the population is going to be on board with like, hey, haven't I seen this before? Or hey, you're just doing the same shit. Or like, hey, the first one that I tried watching, I didn't really love that much, but I gave it a shot. Now I won't give this one a shot. So, if you just any genre, this has happened to like a lot of things, franchises, genres, studios. Like, if you're just producing the same shit over and over and over again, like the natural trend is down. Of course, it's going to be starting successfully. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to replicate that formula.
Remakes are an interesting one because I feel like a lot of the remakes are people that saw the original movie are just naturally invested and want to see the remake, the live action remake version of it. So it's even though there are a lot of remakes out there, I think people, if you have a special connection, let's say you had a special connection to Little Mermaid, you'd want to see the remake of that. Now, would you want to see part 2, like Little Mermaid live action episode 2? Probably not. I mean, the remakes aren't good. They're just the same thing, but with like a new coat of paint. Well, at least that's what we'd hope they are. At YMS, if you've seen his Lion King review, that's not the case. They change a lot of things, and they destroy the original messages of the movies and the character motivations. But those live action remakes are appealing to a lot of people depending on how attached you are to the original movie. Like, they could probably sucker me in if they did like a live action remake of an animated movie that I liked or something like that. Let me see if I can think of one off the top of my head. I don't know if this would work. Let's say Emperor's New Groove. Great movie. I watched it when I was a kid, watched it all the time. It would be really weird if they made a live action remake of that. I'm just seeing the CGI llama and the CGI like animals and stuff like that. But if they did, I'd probably go see it just because I loved the first movie that much. And even if it's the millionth remake, even if it's we've done Little Mermaid, we've done everything from every other Disney movie up to that movie, I'd still probably go see it just because I was that invested in the original. So those remakes are a special kind of allure for a lot of people. So
if it wasn't massively successful, and then of course it's going to go down because they're not doing anything new, right? You can't.
Do you think
trying to replicate lightning in a bottle? Like,
I would actually concede that stuff like The Flash or Shazam can suffer when a bunch of other Marvel shit comes out that's not entertaining because they're too similar superhero stuff. But do you really think that like people being like, oh my god, Lion King, I'm getting the same thing with Little Mermaid?
I think people are more aware of the Disney remake itis.
Well, so
at this point, and I was think
actually
people
going to agree
are more
with you.
sick of it.
My sister, I spoke to her about it because she's not watching them anymore. She used to watch them all, and I was like, why? And then she was like, they're all fucking terrible, and they're kind of gross. Like, she finds them...
So we all know Mahler's sister, absolute degenerate, just like Rags' dad. I just think it's funny whenever you hear these guys reference a family member, because a lot of times you forget that they're people. You just see like the talking heads, the little light up Discord logos, and you forget that they have a life outside of this, as small as it is. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure they have a rich outside life outside of this, just like we all do, right? But
cultural conversation changes.
Well, I guess what we're trying to push is that it's too bad for too long, as opposed to fatigue. Not necessarily that fatigue isn't a part of it, but if they were really well executed, this probably wouldn't be anywhere near as bad.
Well, actually, I mean, I guess a question I would have is, do we think that the discourse surrounding these films online, in part spurred by like YouTube channels, is a factor, I think that's, even if it's not the 100% factor?
Yeah, well, it's a part of the cultural conversation.
I guess here's the next thing would
be. But
here's that if somebody who mainly just watches mainstream films and feels like they're not getting what they want, that simply because of that they would start looking elsewhere for films that might interest them, including the indie sphere, like smaller films, films from abroad.
I would like that to be the case. I don't think the average person is doing it.
I think what Fringy says here kind of lends itself to what YMS said earlier, in the way that people will get burned out of the mainstream movies, just like people got burned out of mainstream video games. Some people did, and that will cause them to have that innate desire in them to look for movies outside of the norm, outside of the mainstream. And having a channel like YMS who recommends who you think he's a smart guy, you think he does a great job and is analytical, and you have similar taste to him. When you're watching his videos, you relate and agree with a lot of the points he's making. And when he recommends something, and that goes for any of these guys, Mauler or Critical Drinker, when they recommend something, you kind of take notice to it, and it gives you like a starting point. So that innate desire of trying to move outside the mainstream, you actually have a specific thing that you can go check out, because a lot of times, depending on where you are in your journey of deciding to explore new ideas or new media, or try a new game or a new movie, a lot of times you can have that feeling for a long period of time, and it just takes that one little, you're just on YouTube and one of your favorite streamers or content creators recommends something, or and you're just like, oh, I'll go check that out. And these guys talk about that in this discussion. I don't know how far along it is, but they do talk about that. And like YMS says, just like he says in that discussion later on, I believe, another thing that kind of stuck with me was, you start it, you try it out, and next thing you know, that's your like new favorite thing, that you become all about that thing. But at some point it was just like an idea, like a feeling that eventually got more and more real, and then you at some point tried it out, and then whatever your most favorite thing in the world eventually came to fruition. So that's a really deep and fun way to think about it, that I think these guys do a good job of explaining.
But that's why, right? That's where I try it. Some people might, and that's where I try to help. So when I was saying earlier that like it's a losing battle trying to get studios to correct themselves into making good movies, like even if we get a movie every once in a while where it's like, oh damn, they actually put faith in real artists and they did this thing, that's not their takeaway, right? What Barbie's success isn't going to be like, oh, we need to hire more young filmmakers like Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. They're going to be like, oh, people really like Barbie toys, right? Because they don't understand art. That's why I'm saying it's a losing battle. Is because like
we're going to make Hot Wheels movies. It's like, oh, okay,
yeah, like that's why it's a losing battle. Not because like they not because the public can't eventually shift and be on your side about a cultural conversation, not because they can't eventually lose money and try to understand why, but because the lessons are always going to be the wrong takeaway. They don't understand the people in charge of funding art in giant studio environments. They don't understand how to make art. They're all fucking Nepo babies. They all have like way too much fucking control over the artist, and they're like, yeah, I think I would like to see this thing, and they always wind up ruining shit. That's exactly what happened to AAA gaming, right?
I completely agree.
That's why I say it's a
be...
losing battle, and that's why I think we should be supporting independent artists instead. Is because
what you just said is part of the argument I would have made for why modern movies suck more than others. What you just said like hits on one of the biggest factors, which
modern
is a lot of people,
movies.
yeah, that they've been inherited by a group of people that are either like they've been hired because of family connections or whatever else. Because like we've commented on it here, but like having control over a $200 to $300 million movie like MOM or Quantumania, and it's given to writers that have zero history, is absolutely insane. But it's being done.
Yeah, or just like they don't care about the franchise. They don't care about. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, it is a scary thought that these massive like beloved franchises are being given to people that have some sort of like unknown connection or relationship with somebody. They don't have very good resumes, or they don't have the you can look at their work history and you can tell they don't have the skill set to handle a franchise like this, and somebody just gives it to them to kind of like launch pad their career because they like them. That way they can say, oh, I worked on this big franchise, and they can that will, and Yeah, it's kind of sleazy if you believe that's how Hollywood works, and I think to a certain extent a lot of us do. That a lot of undeserving people are just giving franchises that are like massive and important to a lot of people as just a like almost a reward or a promotion, instead of giving it to the people that actually care and are going to take good care of it.
Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The formulas at Disney, like there's a reason why we keep seeing the whole like ugly ass realistic character design. Is because that's what their takeaway was from The Lion King 2019, right? Like that's what they were like, oh, this made $1 billion. What do we? Let's make everything else kind of look like this too. It's like, okay, well, it made $1 billion because you played the trailer music from the first film and people had a nostalgic reason to check it out, and people weren't fatigued by all the other previous remakes so far. It wasn't exactly a part of the cultural conversation in the same way. People were fucking hyped.
If you haven't seen YMS's like Lion King Part 1 review, absolutely fantastic. It's like almost, I think, a 3-hour video of him essentially reviewing the Lion King remake, comparing the original to the live action, and it's a fantastic video. Like I said, it's the video that kind of got me into his channel, kind of looking at his channel and his stuff. I'm sure it is a lot. It's millions of views, so you know, people, you probably already heard of it, already seen it, and I would definitely say take a look at it. Just like how if you haven't seen the Critical Drinkers or any EFAPs videos, I'd recommend checking them out to kind of, so that you're not just going into this and having like this preconceived notion of who these people are without actually seeing like the work that they've done. My favorite EFAP episode like ever would probably be EFAP 66, which is their Christmas EFAP, and it's their review of the Force. No, what's the last one called? Rise of Skywalker, the third movie in the trilogy, the J.J. Abrams movie. And I don't want to be like a hipster or anything, but I was watching EFAP 66 on repeat before it became their most popular EFAP video. Like ever since it came out, that's been my favorite, and I think that it is probably their most popular EFAP for that reason. But for a long time it wasn't that popular, and I enjoyed it before that. As far as Critical Drinker goes, I don't really think you can go wrong with any of his videos. I think they're all pretty, you kind of get the gist of what you're in for by watching one or two of his videos. I'd maybe say pick one of his, like, where he's critiquing a series that you didn't like, but you can't really put your finger on it. So let's say maybe you watch She-Hulk, or maybe you watch one of these bad live actions that they're referencing, but you can't really put your finger on why you didn't like it. Maybe watch a Critical Drinker video that kind of talks about it, and he does a really good job of putting into words why he didn't like it, and you may agree or disagree. Like I said, I know I'm going to get a little bit of flack for this. He loved the menu. I didn't like the menu. And so, you know, you don't always disagree with him, but you at least can respect the effort that he puts into the videos. But yeah, if you're going into this and you don't really know anything about any of these guys, check out some of their work. I know YMS asked Mahler for a list of the Critical Drinkers videos that he would recommend to him, and he wants so that's his way of kind of, you know, giving an olive branch to them and saying, all right, I'm interested, I'll listen to what he has to say, send me what you think is his best videos for me to listen to, and gives me a good understanding of who he is, and I'll listen to those.
For the Lion King 2019, and I was trying to warn them, but couldn't do it.
Do you think that the quality of films plays into how much they get fatigued and how quickly?
I mean, I would argue that they were never good, just successful. And I think eventually people start to see through the seams And I think that even retrospectively, there's people that will look at The Lion King 2019 that loved it when it came out and be like, okay, wait, this is actually shit. Same thing happened with Suicide Squad, you know? Like, people fucking loved that movie when it came out. Same thing happened with Amazing Spider-Man 2. A lot of people are just excited to, yeah, those were part of why my channel got huge, is because it was considered to be a very controversial opinion. People were arguing about that shit over Reddit.
I was
there were
watching
enough
you,
people
so
that were like,
my sphere just ordered.
yeah,
like, yeah. I figured everyone hated that one as well, but okay.
Yeah, no, there was the reason why my Suicide Squad video on Reddit is because it was a response to the people that were like fucking the crazy Snyder fans, whatever we want to call them, or DC fanboys. I'm sure you're well aware. Like, there was enough.
Another instance where Mahler shows that he's a genuine fan of YMS and that he watches his content the similar way that people might watch Efap or Drinker to kind of review things and give like really good perspective on it.
People in that crowd, like Angry Joe, and people are just like hyping up this fucking thing like the biggest piece of shit ever made, and people were desperate to have someone just say like, it's shit, right? When a lot of reviewers were kind of tiptoeing around it because they didn't want to upset their audience, and they were like, yeah, you know, I enjoyed it. I liked seeing the Joker. They were just waiting for somebody to be fucking honest about it.
I think the Suicide Squad, the original movie, I thought that the character designs were really good. I thought that the art style was really cool. How they made it, like the movie had very stylistic themes and colors and all that. I thought the plot was absolutely terrible. I thought the characters weren't that good, but that art style was so cool. It was so stylistic, and they brought that into Suicide Squad 2. But I guess they had a little bit more plot, a little bit more character development. But the first one, I didn't love. I wouldn't say I hated it, but I didn't really felt like I got my money's worth when I went to theater. But I thought it had some cool scenes. So in isolation, some scenes that look cool, very artistic, very stylized. I thought the characters were good, and they just didn't do anything with them. That's honestly what I think. I thought the characters were good. Like, the characters looked cool. They had cool backstories, and then they didn't really do anything with them, which I thought was strange.
And that's part of why my channel's big.
So just for clarity's sake, so you don't think that quality has much of a role to play in terms of how quickly people get fatigued about these franchises and things? Like, in an alternate universe where the MCU was just banger after banger, do you think that people would still be fatigued?
Yeah, eventually. I think that, like, even if you're doing a franchise or a formula that doesn't even...
I think what Rags is saying is true. I mean, that's the point I was making earlier that I said they would eventually get to. I think YMS is just being a little, he's focusing too much on the language, but I don't think anyone would disagree with that general point that if they were better quality, the burnout would set in a lot later if they were good quality, versus if they're bad quality, people will get burned out quicker. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, really. I'm not sure what YMS is getting at here.
Necessarily betray what the audience wants. I think that eventually, over time, the audience wants a different thing. Like, Saw wound up giving up after 7, even though it was still profitable.
Maybe he's just misunderstanding what Rags is saying.
No, like, they were still making money, but they were just like, it's not as much. And they saw the shift in the industry of like, okay, now Paranormal Activity is the new thing coming out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people got fatigued of like Westerns. People got fatigued of like, James Bond is still going, right? But it seems like there's a big peak whenever it's the new actor, and then people are like, oh, I kind of like this, and it has the exact same slow drop off. Not necessarily meaning like all of them are bad, although I guess with James Bond a lot of them are bad. But yeah, in an alternate universe where like every single Disney remake was good, then they would probably be doing more successfully. But I would argue that in order for them to be good, they would have to inherently not be doing the same thing over and over anyway. So the fatigue wouldn't even be a factor, because they would have to be changing things up and doing new things in order for them to be good.
Which almost inextricably ties fatigue with quality.
Yeah, part of the reason why they are bad is because they're doing the same shit.
Yeah, because we've talked
Even
about
if
it before,
even if the
but
same shit they were doing was like slightly good at first, like if they're just doing the same shit over and over.
Yeah, it's that's a good point. Like the fatigue and the quality are kind of intertwined. Like eventually you would expect a genre or a theme to kind of like adapt and push the boundaries and become something different over time. Or and if it's not doing that, then yeah, maybe it is getting stuck in a rut. I guess it just depends on how like general or specific you are about like what the theme is, you know, whether it's like violent movies or movies about you know, specific type of violence like mobsters, and then you get even more specific movies about mobsters in New York. You know, so depending on how specific you are, kind of specific you are on the genre, kind of dictates, I guess, how much that genre can change. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if they're not changing the formula at all, then yeah, it's definitely you're gonna get burnt out quicker. But if they're being innovative and creative, and they're kind of like doing the same formula, but they're like doing it in a very interesting and different way, maybe that's a way to kind of create a new genre. You know, maybe that revolutionizes the genre, and it becomes something completely different. So with, I guess, any amount of creativity, that might be the kind of the way to prevent burnout. So in a philosophical way, it's an interesting way of saying that. I guess to kind of just summarize it all, like the root cause of fatigue and burnout is lack of creativity.
Then it becomes bad.
the big thing that we thought that the MCU could have done in Phase 4 is to experiment like crazy and have like the kinds of films that you would never expect to be in the MCU, because they can take those kinds of risks. And even if they fail, if they had like 10 million budgets given to very auteur directors that are given like a parameter on how far they can go in terms of any kind of world building, no necessary cameos, just maybe a person that lives in the world after what's happened, that sort of stuff. I feel like the MCU could have evolved, because plenty of those would have kicked off depending on how good they are, who you give them to, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which would satisfy both, right? It's not like the others, but it would also be of good quality, which means the fatigue would not have set in as early, if at all, at least for however long.
Sure, but the solution to that is not like, oh, people stop watching the movies and then they start making other things. The solution to that is like to fire 75% of people in Hollywood. You know,
I'm inclined to
I
agree,
don't think
yeah.
is like it's not.
But like it's
I don't think that's gonna happen. Like I think it's as fucked as the AAA gaming industry.
yeah, no, I don't even disagree with that, and that's why we've got to get as
Yeah.
much as we can where we can, getting people in, supporting different people. I completely agree with all of that. And
Yeah.
I guess the thing that may come up is that you're not sure that Drinker does enough in that regard, right?
I said earlier that that's something I concede on.
Oh, okay.
No, because like even if he doesn't promote the exact same films that I do, I think that you know, if the main focus of his channel is, you know, like let's call him Disney or studio franchise, whatever shit, you know, for him to be recommending anything outside of that realm is a good step in the right direction, and I'm glad that he's exposing people to that.
So maybe he just doesn't think he does enough, which is what Mueller said. Mueller said, do you think he's not doing enough? And he says, I've already conceded on that point. And then after that, he says, I think it's a step in the right direction. So implying that there's more that can be done. And I don't know if he means that in a general term, as in like there's more that we can all do, or if he means that like specifically to Drinker, like, oh, you know, he's moving in the right direction, but he could do more. So when Mueller says, do you think he could do more? I don't know if I would respond to that as I concede that. I would respond to that as, yes, I do think he can do more, but I also think that he is doing the right thing in his own way. And so I think maybe that's kind of the confusion here, for me at least.
Well, obviously he is, and he's talking to different people who are from the industry that he wants to praise and direct people toward. But there's also, like, I don't know how aware you are of his short film that's currently being created.
I'm aware of him doing some. I think he he has like a book on Amazon too, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I have not consumed. I don't have any indication as to what the level of quality might be for any of those things, or what even
Of
they
course, it's just that it's very good in and of itself that he's looking to create something with people and promote it and try and build himself up as well as others on the indie circuit, right?
are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think YMS, when he did his the original video, not this one, but the one that they're reacting to, I don't think he was aware that Critical Drinker was a independent writer and was creating a film based on his books, his franchise, his series that he makes. So I think at this point it would have been better for him to kind of not acknowledge and appreciate that a little bit more, instead of just kind of going kind of almost, I don't want to say he's acting like he already knew that, but he could, I feel like he could kind of acknowledge it a little bit more and be like, yeah, you know, when I did this video I didn't really know that, and yeah, that's really good. I think that it's, you know, again, he admits that I haven't read it, I don't know if it's good or bad, but just on the idea that you want small people that aren't major studios to make independent work and aren't bought and paid for type thing, that can be seen as good. But maybe on the other hand, he's in the back of his mind, he's going, well, maybe the book is absolutely terrible, maybe the movie's absolutely terrible, maybe it's a whole bunch of propaganda, and maybe it'd be better off if he didn't make any of it. So maybe that's why he's kind of hesitating here. But I just based off of this reaction, I kind of don't feel like he knew that when he made this initial video. I don't think he doesn't mention it in the reaction at all when he's talking about how, you know, with all these millions of subs that Drinker has, that he's kind of wasting his channel and not like helping others find better media, which they address in the sense that he has other videos that do that, but he doesn't address in the sense that he's actually doing the thing that a lot of people that critique and comment online don't do. Like, one of the biggest critiques of a lot of people when they say, oh, well, you talk so much about how bad this movie is, how bad this writing is, why don't you try it yourself? And a lot of people just, you know, it's an accomplishment. You know, it's hard to do. Not everybody's an author, not everybody's able to make movies. So the fact that Critical Drinker is able to do that already kind of gives him a level of respect and professionalism from people, because they're just like, oh, well, he's putting his money where his mouth is. He's not just talking about it and criticizing it. I'm not saying that being a critic isn't important. It is, but at the same time, you know, you do get those people that say, well, if it's so bad, why don't you do a better job? And then, you know, they'll put something out and it's terrible and nobody likes it. And I guess a lot of people are kind of nervous about doing that. But the fact that he has a successful franchise and it's going into a movie shows that he put his money where his mouth is, and it seemed to work for him, which is a very rare thing for a lot of these critics to actually do. And you could always make the argument that, like I said, not everyone has that skill set. Some people are just really good at being a critic, just like not everybody's meant to be an NBA star. Some people are better off like coaching, or some people are better off, you know, being an officiant, or some people are better off knowing how to bet on it. I don't know, but just that not everyone, you know, as much, you know, you can. It's just one of those things that at least you feel like his criticisms come from a place of experience and not necessarily just talking about it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just adds a little extra cred to him.
Right, that's such a long.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's such an interesting, weird bias that we have about media, where we think like all music sucks now, or all movies suck now, and here's why. When in reality, it's like you just have to know what to watch. You just have to like have a healthy media diet. To try new
No
things,
problem.
not
That's fine.
just
No,
only
it's all good.
watch
I know about
what
it.
is essentially just advertised to you and spoon-fed to you through giant corporations. So I haven't watched this, but I found myself being interested enough to like do any kind of commentary on this guy, even though I haven't done it before, because of the fact that he showed up on Russell Brand, which sort of kind of reinforces my initial thought about him, is that he's showing up on what is really a political, anti-vax, conspiracy, grifting platform.
He really doesn't like Russell Brand, and it's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I don't feel any strong way for or against him because I haven't really seen any of his work, but it seems like he's very much in the political sphere. So if you're in that world, then I'm sure you have a strong feeling on him.
And he's showing up as this guy, like...
But like I said earlier, if he already doesn't like Russell Brand, then he's probably not giving him the best impression of a drinker for being on there with him. Guilt by association type thing. In addition to all the other reasons that he provided earlier.
So this is the title. So this is why movies are shit now with the critical drinker. It's like, okay, well, this is kind of what I experienced anecdotally when I, met somebody who was essentially just eating up a bunch of conspiracy anti-vax content, like weird, like New World Order, George Soros, maybe not explicitly saying it, but pretty much saying it content. This is not a movie review channel, and he's being featured on it. And so I just thought that this was interesting enough to at least see what the fuck it is. So let's see what this is.
You have to wait. Is he back?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, we'll wait. We can. Yeah, wait just a second for him. Because I've got a question to ask.
Do you now?
I do. Yeah, I just have I do.
You got it down on your little.
Oh,
like
there he is. He's
notepad.
back. He's back.
Go on, Rags. Ask a question.
Out of you.
I just a random funny thought while they're kind of just chit chatting right now. Like when I was saying earlier with the whole, like, I think it's hard to imagine like Mulder and Rags having family, when they reference their dad or their sister. It's like, because you see them as these little talking baubles on your screen. I was like, well, you would imagine maybe Rags' dad is like a Saint Bernard or something, and that Mulder's sister's like a similar, like whatever Mulder's thing is, like glowing eye crab person, and then Fringy's like whatever relatives, his grandmother is like some type of toad or something like that. It's
You talked about Russell Brand here, how Drinker showed up on the Russell Brand, how Russell Brand is a conspiracy theorist and anti-vax and stuff like that. This is weird, but if Russell Brand reached out to you and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about movies," would you go on and talk to him about movies?
I'm not sure. Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right, so.
But he has his interviews are very very non-confrontational and leading. He kind of like, we'll see as it goes along.
And that's even the worst part is, like, if YMS is admitting that he knows that Russell Brand's interviews are bad and that they're non-confrontational and that he's leading, then why would that be a good way to get to know the critical drinker? Like, you already think the interviewer's bad. You know that the interviewer's bad, and that's what you want your introduction to be. Like, if the critical drinker is just a nice guy, which I think he comes off as a nice guy, then he might not, really respond too well. He might not like give much pushback or whatever to Russell Brand. He might just be like, okay, this is a nice platform, and he'd just be really nice and cordial the whole time, and they really won't get to the meat of anything. So I just think that him knowing that and going to watch it anyway, I don't know if that'd be the best impression of somebody. But at the same time, maybe the fact that the critical drinker took the interview, he's seeing that as a reflection on critical drinker's character, that he even took the interview with this grifter, with this charlatan, with this sham, that somehow is kind of, in addition to the other things, his other issues and what he's heard, antidotally, that those things combined give him a bad impression going into it anyway.
So do you-
I'm actually
you think
shocked
that-
that he asked some genuine questions at certain points, but
Oh, all right.
there's like a part of him that comes through at points.
Because I was going to say
Alright,
that if Russell
alright.
Brand invited me, I would totally go on. But if he was to be like,
Yeah,
"Did you know the Earth is flat?" I'd be
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck are you talking about, mate?"
I'd say, yeah,
my criticism.
finally, speak the truth.
I want to make clear, it's not a criticism of the critical drinker to have accepted going on to Russell Brand's show. I was mentioning that it's a reflection of the audience crossover that he would be invited there in the first place.
Okay, so that makes sense. That they share enough an audience that Russell Brand would extend the invitation to him. I don't necessarily know if that's true. Maybe it's just because he's heard of the critical drinker. Maybe he's a fan of his work. Maybe I don't know. Maybe, like I said, maybe the critical drinker got put on his radar because of the Russell Crowe interview. It might not be that they share the same audience. You know, maybe Russell Brand knows Russell Crowe. Maybe all the Russells know each other and they know Russell Wilson and they know Russell Terrier. But yeah, maybe they all just know. Maybe he knows Russell Crowe and he's like, "Oh, really? You talked to that guy? How was it? It was good. It was safe. All right. Well, then I guess I'll give him a talk." So I don't necessarily know that you can come to the conclusion that he invited him because they share the same audience. But that could be it.
Right. It's a observation of the sort of audience. The same thing I was talking about earlier.
Well, so obviously the only problem would be, because I'm not familiar, does Russell ever have people on that he doesn't necessarily align with?
I mean, I would have to watch every single Russell Brand video, but like
I don't even mean in that sense. I just
right.
mean, like, doesn't he have people that, theoretically speaking, he would have a bit of a confrontation with, maybe? Like, he talks to them about their ideas.
That's not my understanding. My understanding is he's mostly just creating like a space for. He knows what his audience wants to hear, and he kind of just facilitates that with the types of conversations that he has.
In case you didn't know, Drinker himself, he's been interviewed now, like, on countless channels. I think he accepts a lot of invitations from anything from like 0 subs to people like Russell Brand. I think that if not saying this for any particular reason, but if, let's say, AOC was to ask him for an interview, I think he'd accept.
Russell Brand, or sorry, Critical Drinker?
Yeah, Critical Drinker.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously,
again, it's not a reflection on Critical Drinker to appear on the program. It's to even for Russell Brand to consider that to be something he wants on the program. I'm saying that there's an audience alignment.
Okay.
Not,
and like I said, I disagree.
Or anything,
I didn't pause it.
Enough crossover that it makes.
Like I said, I disagree with that. I think there could be a number of reasons why he invited him over. I could just to briefly repeat myself. Maybe Russell Brand knows Russell Crowe, or maybe one of the other people that Critical Drinkers had talked to, and he recommended having an interview with him. Or maybe he's making waves in Hollywood, so Hollywood people want to talk to him. So there's a that could be the reason. Not saying that Russell Brand wouldn't maybe do some research after it was recommended to him to make sure that this guy isn't going to completely outrage his audience. I don't know how much content creators typically do that type of research when they have a guest over. I'm guessing it's a lot. I've never really thought about it because it's not something that I would do, but that makes sense. But yeah, I think there's a ton of reasons why he might invite somebody. Like I said, maybe he's a fan of his work. Maybe he just likes his work and it has nothing to do with politics. You know, maybe he generally just likes his movie reviews.
It made enough sense for him to bring him on. Like, I don't think Russell Brand's
okay, yeah, we have to subscribe to
about to invite me on.
I'd watch the fuck out of that.
Yeah, whole fucking website or whatever. He might as well be on the Daily Wire, I guess.
Hey, you Awakening Wonders, thanks for joining me on Stay
That
Free
big
with
fucking
Russell
COVID
Brand.
ball.
I'm very excited about today's show. The first 50
He used to be.
Oh,
a
that
is
what that is?
It's 100%. That's what it is.
Okay.
It's a fucking crypto fucking COVID ball.
I don't know what crypto COVID ball means. Crypto, does that mean like secret? Like, is that what that means, or is it some kind of like internet meme? Like, I don't know.
All right.
That's the whole reason why his thing fucking blew up. It's because he was,
Like I said, I know
doing the
nothing
whole,
about
like,
his stuff.
I don't.
shit."
Yeah,
don't know.
I know more about him as an
He
actor than I do as
did-
anything else.
He did movies right before,
Yeah.
but does he do that?
He hasn't been
still?
acting for a while.
Okay.
He's
well
the
then, yeah,
fucking. He's like he's somewhere between Joe Rogan and Gwyneth Paltrow. He's somewhere in between.
Okay.
Be
Okay.
on YouTube, and that's going to be relevant to you 6.5 million awakening wonders over there.
Awakening. It's funny that he uses the term awakening because, like, if a leftist or left-leaning person, or even like someone,
You can see YMS is drinking a little here, and by the end of the movie, he gets a little. He's having a good time. You can tell he's enjoying himself. He's feeling the buzz. So there's nothing wrong with that. I know me personally. I don't know if I would how confident I would be getting a buzz and trying to review media, like focus really hard, but he might be a completely different breed of person, and from what his video doesn't like devolve into like crazy like drunken rants. Like, it actually ends up holding like pretty good logic and consistency, and even he makes a lot of good points throughout the whole thing. So I guess when you're just like when you're that smart of a guy, I guess it doesn't really matter if you have a few drinks or not.
even someone like Joe Biden said awakening, they would be like, it means woke.
Because you surely love the critical drinker, a man who has analysed and critiqued contemporary cinema with a perspective that you're unlikely to see in the mainstream.
I think we are definitely stuck in a rut as a culture when it comes to just
See, this is something that I take a bit of an issue with, is like prioritizing the idea of like, my culture, right? Like, I don't know if I give too much of a shit about, like, I'm an individual, I'm an individual. Like, I like movies that I like, and I like movies from a variety of cultures. Like, if America decides to go in certain trends about movies, like, I'm going to call it out, right? I'm going to call out America mostly for not being exposed to different cultures. But, like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of fear-mongering when it comes to, like, movies are getting, like, too feminist, or movies are, like, getting too, like, I don't know. It seems like weird fear-mongering shit. Maybe I'm reading a bit too far into it. He's barely said anything.
That's what I was going to say. Is he's like, I'm not even sure what he said yet.
I figure I'd address most of the criticisms we would have like within the stream itself.
Mhm.
But I will add more commentary in a bit. Also, I want to point out, after thoroughly seeing a lot of like back and forth about people that hate the critical drinker on like my subreddit or the Sardonicast subreddit, and other subreddits, like obviously he's met with a lot of criticism. I do want to point out that I've seen a bunch of criticism against him that I thought was like a little unfair. Where like, oh, he didn't like,
Look
like
at you.
he didn't think.
I mean, that goes for YMS on other places. That goes for us on
to-
other places. It's insane and it sucks, but there's not much any of us can really do about
it's,
it. But I'm
it's
glad you
really
pointed it
shit.
out. That's cool.
Yeah, a little bit of shared experience here, where all these guys, they feel when you get big enough, I guess you're going to get a portion of your audience that gives you a lot of unfair, maybe not even your audience, but a portion of criticism is very unfair, and it's like a an intentional or unintentional mischaracterization of what you represent. And so I made that point in the last video, kind of just saying that maybe, just because you and a couple hundred, and you see a couple hundred people saying something, if you're talking about a channel with millions of views, or millions of subs, tens of millions of views or hundreds of millions of views, I don't know how big some of these channels are, but you're going to be under the impression that the few hundred people that you interact with are the majority opinion. And there's nothing wrong with saying that these people came away with this interpretation for a reason, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, but at the same time, it's also kind of better that once you're aware that that is a very specific interpretation, to expose yourself to other versions of looking at the same thing and comparing and kind of deciding who you agree with more. And I mean, like, I mean this in general, not just talking about YMS here specifically, but and actually like really try to understand the other side, really try to kind of dig in to, you know, people outside of your group, and that way you can agree whether or not, you know, that and it's also good because you're exposed to more points, and maybe you pick up some points here and there, and you kind of pick and choose your own perspective. And that's exactly what YMS is doing here, and that's why it's good because he's literally coming over to people that like the Critical Drinker. You would say these are experts on liking him, and just kind of, you know, getting outside of his comfort zone, where he knows he's, you know, where he's with a lot of people that are going to agree with him, at least the people that kind of, that he's reading the opinions that dislike the Critical Drinker. And he's getting out of his comfort zone and talking to people that are strongly for the Critical Drinker and getting their viewpoints on this.
I am glad. Yeah, a lot of people wouldn't.
Of like the right name of a
yeah.
Of like the right name of a movie at a time, where he like, you know, didn't have the right word when he said, like, he was on a live stream or whatever. Like sometimes people are a little too like overly critical or jumping the gun when it's like, this guy's like right leaning. It's like, okay, you know, whatever. Like, I don't hate anybody just because they're conservative, right? Like, but I'm at least going to have a conversation about what I find disagreeable about them.
Relying on the past.
As you say, the motivation behind these...
I find that funny because he's sorry, we barely started.
We are definitely stuck in a rut.
It sucks because I'm reacting to something that I don't know is just like a little fucking preview at the beginning. It's like a little compilation.
Practice for
Damn,
later.
hearing that
When
whole
the real
sentence
thing
is
comes
so
out.
interesting because the content that I've consumed from him, and again, I have not watched all of his content. What I've seen is like literally what he's describing, right? Like, oh, we're stuck in a rut where we're all the content is relying on the past, when all I hear him talk about is like, why can't we have movies like they were in the 80s?
Oh, is there anything you want to add? Because of course, like this feels like a misunderstanding of what he's saying.
Yeah, no, I can see where the miscommunication is, but I think it goes back to the earlier point of like media diet, right? Where it's like if it is studio movies, then yeah, you would inherently want to go back to a period where studio movies were better, where the average movie in a theater you could watch, you know, would be something that, you know,
Not inherently, right?
that would be
Just 'cause of
enjoyable,
the
but
quality of
Yeah,
just because of the quality.
There's production elements and technology advancements now that Drinker would likely cite to you that are really bad that people are relying on, be it the overuse of CG or the volume screen or different kinds of like attempts at de-aging people in this, like, and everything looks fake and plasticky and rubbery versus what he loves, which is like a primary area. He would probably argue to you like this appears in all eras, but that it was very prominent to him from his perception in like the 80s, 90s maybe, or 70s, wherever he would particularly choose, of filmmaking that was really nuts and bolts, and whenever you watch it, it looks gritty and real and awesome, sort of.
Yeah, I think most people have a love-hate relationship with the CGI. I think a lot of people do kind of miss the practical effects. Not saying that they don't still use them, and when they do use them, they can look really good, but a lot of people do like the real sets and the real props and the real costumes versus what a lot of modern movies do now, which is just CGI everything. And you can, in some movies you can really tell that it's, you know, it looks really bad. I mean, I will say like an exception is the newest Avatar movie bored me to tears, and maybe that's because it was made for people with children, so if you have a lot of little kids, particularly small kids, if you have a lot of little kids, then you probably really related to that movie, enjoyed it, or maybe not. Maybe it was just a boring movie. But God, did it look good, man. Like that ruined CG for me. Like every movie that I've seen since The Way of Water, the new Avatar movie, like it just looks horrible compared to that movie. Like they I don't know what they did, but the CG looks so good in that movie. And there's still parts where it looks, you know, fake or whatever, and there's still a lot of parts where you go, yeah, I wish that was practical or whatever. But you just go, why can't every movie that uses CG have it look like this? And then it also goes, well, you know, in the future, if the people that did the Avatar CG keep improving, it's going to be almost perfect. So, you know, you could make the argument that the whole CG thing is like a necessary evil in order to get to the final product of where like it does look real enough where maybe you can't even tell. But in order to get to that point, they have to go through all these like growing pains of like mediocre CG. But a lot of times I think these guys would agree that it's just kind of lazy and it's just unnecessary, and it's things that like that you could have just used a practical effect for. And they would also argue, like I remember in the Plinkett reviews of the original Star Wars remakes, episode 1, 2, and 3, where he says, you know, like the actors, like they're reacting to like a green stick on a ball, and so they have to kind of like, the reactions aren't as real as if they had like a practical whatever in front of them. And I mean, that also goes to like how good is the actor, but I guess it makes it significantly harder if there's nothing to really react to and you have to pretend. You know, so it's just something to think about.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much all the point he's making, because of course, as you're pointing out, he hates the idea of digging up the corpses of the past and parading them up in today. And so the miscommunication is just that, yeah, he doesn't I think I mentioned to you, he doesn't want Indiana Jones. He wants films made in the same vein that Indiana Jones was created. That would be the simplest way to put it.
Yeah. Like every single video I've seen from him is like, oh, I wish movies were like they were from the past, but now they're different and bad. So that's kind of,
in some ways, I'm sure he is. Like I was saying, highly made with like really good practical effects, and maybe with like no more, like not as many as the remakes, more original IPs. But I'm sure they did have a lot of shitty remakes in the 80s, and maybe not as many. Maybe those weren't like the biggest movies, unless they were good remakes. But I'm sure there are some things from the 80s that were really good, because the 80s were, from what I know, were very revolutionary time in movies, and they were like experimenting, and they were going from I don't know, they were revolutionizing effects, and they were doing it in very creative and cool ways. It wasn't just like CG for everything. They were using, you know, costume design. They were using advanced makeup. They were mixing some CG in there, but it wasn't like ridiculous. It was just kind of just enough to help make the effects look real, the practical effects look real. I'm not really an expert on this stuff, but I think they go into it more in the video anyway, and we can comment on that when we get there.
Interesting, actually.
As you say, the motivation behind these IPs and these franchise movies is no one's willing to take a risk.
What they lack with these modern characters.
See, that's not untrue what Russell Brand just said. Like, I want to see more risk taking in franchise,
agreed,
big budget movies.
Yeah, that's more artistic.
They're not willing to take that step of having
as I've heard,
and be vulnerable. And
this is not untrue. He's saying,
yeah, it's so frustrating, because it seems like they're setting themselves up to fail every time that they try that. Every once in a while, they're like, okay, we're gonna do fucking Beau is Afraid. I'm like, you can't have expected that to make money.
No.
Like, that was only like 30 million or something, I guess. Still.
I wasn't.
That was like A24's highest budget, but
I wasn't sure that Oppenheimer was going to be able to make it, but I guess I'm glad it did.
I mean, Christopher Nolan's a safe bet.
Well, Tenet fell apart because of COVID, I guess, right? Is what you'd say.
That was the only reason that it wasn't successful, was COVID. Yeah,
I think Christopher Nolan is a selling point, but then there is the fact that the film had to overcome being a 3-hour-long R-rated biopic. Like, I think that seems like it would be a harder sell than a lot of other things, but it really does seem like the Barbie Oppenheimer like dual sort of screening thing, like that really helped both of those films.
I'd also think I've seen people argue that Tenet is not anywhere near as good as Oppenheimer.
Well, I mean, I really like Oppenheimer, and I don't think I want to see Tenet.
I think just on this, like, again, another reason why, you know, you should be a fan of YMS if you're not. He made a really good point. He was, I think, the first one that I heard to make this point, and maybe he's just you know, maybe he heard this on the internet somewhere and he thought it was a good point, but he was the first one that I heard make this point, that the whole Barbie Oppenheimer thing, where you take like a ridiculously fun movie like Barbie and you mix it with a darker polar opposite themed movie like Oppenheimer, and that caused all this controversy, and you release them on the same weekend, and it create this like media pool. He just goes, he says, I can't wait for other people to try to recreate this or try to like fail at recreating this. And the example that he referenced is that they're trying to release the Saw movie and Paw Patrol, and then he said, I think he said hashtag Saw Patrol. Like, I thought that was absolutely hilarious. It's such a good point, because it was such a successful release, the Barbie and Oppenheimer movie, and obviously studios are going to try to like recreate the internet sensation, and like he says, they'll probably fail miserably because they don't really understand like why these movies were so popular, and you know, they're going to try to recreate the magic. And so I again, YMS with a fantastic point. I thought that was brilliant.
I have no
Wow.
interest in Tenet.
I don't think I want to.
You
Well,
saw it,
maybe one day.
Adam. What did you think of Tenet?
It's really annoying.
That's the way to
Well,
describe
now I
it.
want to see it.
Yeah, now
I
I'm
love annoying
sold.
movies. Those are my favorite movies, are the annoying ones. I've had a lot of practice lately.
It's Tenet. Tenet is what you would make if you were trying to parody a Christopher Nolan film.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh my god.
We're going to talk
Oh
about
wait, sorry, wait, what? Okay, wait. I thought he was talking about the actual production, not characters.
these franchise movies is no one's willing to take a risk.
What they lack with these modern characters that they try.
Oh, he's talking purely about characters. Okay, this is one that I have to think about more. I was talking about funding. I was talking about like, oh yeah, we want movies with ideas and scripts that take more risks. He's talking about like characters that are like flawed. I don't know if I
So
necessarily.
yeah, these
agree
are
with that as
snippets of a
trend, but I'll have
conversation
to
without
hear
a
it
full
out.
context that
Yeah.
I shouldn't have
They're
even been
not-
commenting on, but I didn't realize were
That's all right.
just the editing.
willing to take that step of have them fail and be vulnerable and have flaws and weaknesses.
We're going
I don't know. He didn't realize it was the editing, the crazy flashing back and forth, and the weird violin music didn't kind of give away that this was an edit. Like, now granted, it looks like he's maybe reading, he's having a drink, he's chilling, so maybe he's just thinking that like this is like a creative way to start the interview or something. But I don't know if I buy that he doesn't believe this is editing. I think. Well, hold on, wait. Let me think. I think he does. I do believe that that the original video, actually no, I take that back. I do think he believes this isn't editing, and I think that it's just funnier in that way because he thinks this is the actual interview, and because he's either distracted or he's like he's not really thinking straight, but subconsciously I think he knows that it's that there may be something's wrong here with the flashing lights and the weird violin music. It happens, man.
to talk about Sound of Freedom. Why is this movie causing so much
Oh,
controversy?
I would love to hear the Critical Drinker talk about Sound of Freedom.
I'm also going to start referring to the
He
Critical
does.
Drinker by his actual human
Mhm.
name, and I'm going to ask you to remove them aviators. Not yet, not while we're still
Are we getting a face reveal?
still on YouTube.
Oh, we have to go to the website to get the face reveal? Oh, God.
Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble.
Oh, Rumble. Oh, Rumble. Well, we can be a bit more explicit about our anti-vaccine nonsense.
Pretty good accent, better than I could do. Yeah, I think the face reveal thing's kind of funny because anyone who's seen the Critical Drinker do his it's not a face reveal. I mean, he takes his glasses off all the time. I don't know when he started doing his live cam though, because I do know for a long time he just had the logo for a long period of time, and then I want to say in the last couple of years he started doing the face cam, and bit of a shock that he looks exactly like his logo, so I thought that it's a little funny history there, but no, it's not really a face reveal. Russell Brand's probably just trying to hype it up for people that maybe don't really know much about the Critical Drinker or have seen him in other things. Just being a showman.
Is the Critical
That's true.
Drinker. Drinker, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, man. I can't believe it. I'm sandwiched right between Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis.
They
I've got a
doxed
lot
his
to live up to
name?
on this one.
Is he on Tucker Carlson and Run? Sorry. Oh, he's sandwiched as in, was that who Russell Brand had on before and after?
You better come.
Oh my God, he held them up as like idols. That's
Are we
fucking...
still watching 1.25 speed?
It doesn't feel like it, I'll make sure. But, so, I assume it was just caught there that you said you're surprised he sees Ron DeSantis and Tucker Carlson as idols?
I don't know if I said surprise, but yeah, I don't necessarily...
Oh, what I'm saying is that he doesn't. He's saying that he has to live up to them as entertainment.
Okay.
And that's what I mean by like interpretation and clarification here, because you could interpret that either way. If you say like, I can't believe I have to follow up these two like big figures, you could interpret that as in like, I can't believe I have to follow up my idols, or you could interpret that as like, I can't believe that I have to follow up these famous people, you know, I'm a nobody, or I have a lot of respect for these guys, you know. You can interpret that in either way, and I think, you know, it's good that YMS is kind of on here, because maybe he didn't think about like, oh, maybe he's just saying that he's not, you know, you're talking about what did he say? Ron DeSantis, who's the other guy? Tucker Carlson, Tucker Carlson. And I know, you know, Ron DeSantis is a governor. I know that much. They mentioned it here. And so like, you're following a governor. You're following someone who like governs a state, and you're just like an internet guy, you know. So that you know, that's how the Efap guys are going to say that that's what Critical Drinker meant when he said that, and that so, but I mean, honestly, only the drinker knows. You know, if the drink was here, he could clarify for sure. But just putting it out there that could be the other way to interpret it, I think is good, because YMS might have not ever thought about that way of looking at it had he not come on here, and he might have just forever just been like, oh, this guy loves Ron DeSantis and Chris Tucker Carlson. I keep wanting to Chris Tucker. I think two different people, very, very different people, you know. But so yeah, I think that's just one example of why this was a very healthy discourse. At least, I mean, obviously all the conversation up to this point where they're not even really talking about the video was really fun and interesting, with them talking about movies and the modern cinema. That's what you want to see. You want to see like the most brilliant minds in film review talk about the media landscape. You know, that's the icing on the cake. And then the reviewing the video, you know, that's you know, they get to that when they get to that. And but now that they are talking about it, it's like I said, that's you know, that's something good that already came from it, and there's plenty of other instances like that where YMS has this kind of interpretation of the Critical Drinker, and then, you know, Maul and Rags give him another reasonable interpretation that someone else could walk away with. And a lot of it, I think, has to do just with the biases you have going into it. I don't think it's necessarily like the drinker's fault that you interpreted that way. I think that it can just be interpreted in multiple different ways, and you interpret it a way that fit your worldview, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all have our own worldview. So there is a point later in this video where I think YMS does kind of get to the point where he's saying, well, kind of implying that it's the drinker's the drinker's fault that it's being implied in a certain way. Again, I really don't want to speak too much on that right now, because I could be misremembering, and we'll get to that later.
Because I don't even know that he watches anything from Tucker Carlson, I don't think he knows anything about Ron DeSantis. I'd be surprised if he did. I don't know, but
so here's something that I'll point out, and we'll see as the interview goes along. But I feel as though, and this is not to suggest that, you know, Critical Drinker is doing this for like money or whatever. I think that it's a very real, like, kind of psychological phenomenon that we all go through. Like, if we're interacting with a certain type of person, and you know that person wants to hear like a certain type of thing, I think that most people kind of gravitate towards like I guess like changing their phrasing or even sort of
Yeah, I
like
think you're right.
nudging into things that they want to hear. And I feel like there's moments in this interview where Critical Drinker does that, maybe not consciously. Where I think he understands like being on the Russell Brand program and him having those guests. I think that kind of being like, oh, I have to live up to that. That is like kind of like a maybe not direct, but mild praising of.
I think what he's saying is that maybe there's some parts in this video where Drinker is being purposely ambiguous to kind of appeal to Russell Brand's audience, or what he believes Russell Brand's audience is. And I think that's kind of like applying motive to the Critical Drinker, and it's assuming that he knows what Russell Brand's audience is and what they would want to hear. And I think the Efap guys kind of push back on that a little bit and kind of say that that might not be the case.
Those two.
I think he may have ended up saying the same thing, even if like Russell had said, I had Trump on previously and I'm Biden on next week. He would be like, holy fuck, I've got a lot to live up to, because that's huge.
Yeah, just because they're big names.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the impression I
that makes
get,
sense.
is that it's
I think so. Yeah.
By comparison, Drinker is not as well known as Tucker.
He's a
Carlson.
YouTube film reviewer.
Yeah, he does not strike me as a Ron DeSantis fan.
Here's a question: since we're clarifying that, is there an issue if he did idolize Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis?
It wouldn't necessarily be an issue in and of itself. It would be an issue if it were misrepresentative of how he has stated otherwise. Like I said, if he may, I don't actually know, but my impression from this is that he's just saying they're big figures, and that I think you misunderstood. That's all.
Okay.
As for like the nature of someone's idolization of any particular person could be good or bad or neutral. It just depends on what they say, right?
Mm-hmm. And was that who Russell Brand had on before and after?
You better come.
Oh my god, he held them up as like idols. That's fucking fascinating. This is amazing.
Drinker, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, man. I can't believe it. I'm sandwiched right between Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis. I've got a lot to live up to on this one.
Damn, like I feel like even if I were like conservative Republican, like to hold Ron DeSantis up as like a person to like have to live up to. Yeah, that's like praising Ted Cruz. Ron DeSantis is as lame as Ted Cruz. Like he's as pathetic and as much of a loser. Like Ron DeSantis is only a name now.
And this is kind of an unfortunate thing of like when you're just reacting to somebody for the first time by by yourself, you don't have anybody to kind of give you pushback on an idea that could be interpreted a different way, and therefore you might run with it for a little bit. So YMS has already got this notion in his mind that that's what Critical Drinker was doing, and now he's going to kind of formulate more thoughts based on that assumption. And so
because he's been popular in Florida and people are seeing him as like the only alternative to Trump, when in reality like he's going to get
but not just the governor, but making like huge fucking news stories of his state and being as what's the word, provocative as possible in his political governance.
He fucking crushed.
Mahler just plays the video. He's not going to touch that. I don't blame him.
The primaries, like Ron DeSantis has zero chance. Like, this is insane.
You better come
like nobody's gonna even know Ron DeSantis' name after a while.
up with some pretty powerful right-wing ideology right now. It better be slide it into your reviews somehow if you can. Otherwise, you simply will not fit in with the roster. Thanks for joining us, mate.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on, man.
One of your most recent.
What was that? Was that like an ironic? I was kind of confused what he was trying to get at there.
My interpretation of that, I wasn't really confused by it. I felt like he was saying, you bet Russell Brand was kind of making a joke there, saying, wow, you were in between these two big right-wing figures. You better say something right-wing in your videos now, so that you fit in better, you know.
recent videos that I enjoyed watching was
That was a
your
little joke, I guess,
analysis
I'm
and review
I don't
of
get it.
the
Yeah.
latest Indiana
Mhm,
Jones
it's-
movie. It seemed you kind of reached in a sense,
I don't think it was a particularly funny joke, but you know, he just, I guess he's just, you know, he's just trying to do topical humor. He had the, you know, they're talking, they're two right wing guys, and they're important guys, and you know.
a zenith of your analysis in itself.
See, Russell Brand didn't even like believe in any of this shit politically until it got him views. Like, he's such a fucking grifter. He's as much of a grifter as like who's the woman who does Goop?
Oh, Gwyneth
Gwyneth
Paltrow?
Paltrow, yeah.
Paltrow. Like, it's literally just like follow the money.
Are we
shit,
so?
right?
Are we on 1.25 speed or no?
I changed it again, but I don't know if it's ignoring me.
Can we do 1.5
What the-
and see if it's still
Yeah,
watchable?
sure. I'll put-
One thing I've noticed about Mahler is that he does have a interesting sense of humor. Like, typically, I might be oversimplifying this, but typically words like goop, sludge, you know, like just anything like gunk. You know, anytime someone uses like that as a description of something in a serious way, it seems to crack him up.
to that.
Thank you.
Like, Russell Brand is the male Gwyneth Paltrow. You know, maybe Joe Rogan is a bit, but Joe Rogan, I at least believe that he believes what he's saying, whereas Russell Brand, I don't believe that he believes what he's saying.
For what Lynch might call the duck's eye, the point within the point. It seemed to me that what you were saying is that our culture is incapable of coming up with new and novel and innovative content, and it's kind of like a Tomb Raider dragging cadavers from the soil, reanimating them, and then not even respecting them. Is that the essence of your perspective on sort of mainstream movie franchises, and what do you think that tells us more broadly?
So, like, we have to be asking ourselves, why is Russell Brand a guy who literally only does like conspiracy shit now? And like literally just like, I'm going on Rumble and I'm going to be very critical of vaccines in a way that is not allowed on YouTube, right? Like that's his whole shtick. For him to have on like the critical drinkers, like what does that tell you, right? I'm not gonna say like, oh, that means critical drinkers content.
What
is
does that tell you?
But like a lot of it kind of feeds into the same audience, you know? It's
That indeed that is your perspective.
I
Exactly
just,
what I was saying.
as much as that there may be crossover and everything, it's just like, but isn't there equal reason in a cynical sense that Russell Brand would bring on big figures that are willing to come on?
Yeah, but if they can't have a conversation about the same like kind of culture war stuff that he regularly talks about, then there's really no point. Just kind of what I was getting at.
I mean, they don't talk about
He's not.
anything.
He doesn't really. I don't know. I don't know if he has many conversations that aren't kind of explicitly aiming towards just doing things that his audience wants to hear.
But like he had
I
access.
could be wrong. I could be wrong, but
He had an avenue in this conversation being an actor, right? He does bring it up at some points. Like he's talking to Drinker about the nature of
yeah,
the
he
creation
doesn't really
of...
do that much anymore.
Well, I mean, to be fair, to Mahler's point, it's like I said, I didn't really know Russell Brand was really into this whole political commentary thing. I've known him from being on Joe Rogan, and he talks about being an actor, and that's kind of like the interesting thing. And then I guess his like personal life, like it seems like he has an eccentric personal life, you know. He just seems like an eccentric dude, you know. And he plays eccentric dudes in movies too, which is interesting. So, you know, I think Mueller's just referencing that there could be a multitude of reasons why he brings a critical drinker on, maybe from a film fan, you know, because he is an actor and maybe he's a fan of critical drinker's work.
No, of course, but he talks to Drinker about like even the Arthur remake, right? And how that went very bad, and that they talk for a little bit about how that's like almost par for the course with a lot of projects these days.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there's an avenue here that he would bring Drinker on for both monetary benefit, exposure, and for he can talk to him. He knows what Drinker's talking about. He's familiar with the industry.
Or Mahler, there could be a political agenda. No, I don't know. I'm just saying there could be. You don't know. Maybe.
And I think he is a fan of his channel.
Okay.
He's at least seen his videos. I'm just saying that there's a lot of explanations for why he would bring him on.
I don't even know it. I'm not even confident Russell Brand has ever heard of him before. I feel like
That
he's
could
got
be
a
the
team.
case, but that he did at least
Could
watch
be.
some of his videos. So there's something he has
Yeah,
to
clicked
like.
on a couple.
Like if
He was he at least knows what kind of questions to ask him about his content in a way that feeds into both of their demographics at the same time.
if I had like a person setting up interviews and stuff, and they were emailing different people, and they got access to a 5 million YouTube reviewer person that I'd never heard of or seen the videos of, I might, jump in briefly and then find out what do they mainly talk about, and then I can ask them about that. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is there can be a lot more of a disconnected reason for him to come on. It doesn't have to be that there's big crossover with their audience in relation to conspiracies.
Yep.
Perspective drinker.
I think that's wildly wrong because that metaphor you just gave me would have at least been entertaining, unlike this movie. No, like I think we are definitely stuck in a rut as a culture when it comes to just relying on the past and just like.
Man, I can't believe that he said that, because isn't that all of his content just saying like movies in the past were better?
Digging up old ideas, like you say, bringing back old characters,
Yeah,
old
but
actors, and
I think that's
Well,
different, right?
we went over it. It's the
It depends. Yeah, it depends if your media landscape is studio movies or all movies is really just the.
well, it could be both studio movies and all movies, and that you're making the commentary about studio movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I Mahler just specifies there. They've already talked about it in depth before that, and YMS, I think, does the right thing and just kind of, yeah. You said that. I said my thing. Let's move on.
And at the same time, like I said, he misses the days of old for creation of movies, not for he wants to see more of Luke and Indiana Jones and stuff.
just kind of humiliating them on screen and trying.
I mean, like, I think the Critical Drinker and I agree.
And I think Mahler is aware that that they've already kind of hashed this out. That's why he doesn't really wait for a response from YMS, because he's already kind of made that point, and YMS has already kind of heard it. I think he's just, like I said, he's more so just responding to the video. The video's saying something, and Mahler's just kind of countering the video. Not necessarily YMS just doesn't want that idea and statement just kind of just be left out there. And like I said, it could just be because, people are joining in and, they hear that line and there's no rebuttal to it. Or it could be the video's playing for too long and he wants to just add some commentary kind of.
On this, that like they're rehashing old IPs and you need to have new ideas, and it would be better if risks were taken. Like, I think that there are some basic things that we could agree on for sure. Maybe we have like different political leanings and different interpretations of things in the long run, right?
to use them as this weird springboard to launch like a new generation of characters, but they're never any good. They're always unlikable idiots who just bore people to tears.
They're never any good. They're always unlikable idiots that just bore people to tears. Like, I think that that's a man. Like, it's not untrue what he's saying, but it reflects like a very narrow media diet. It reflects a very narrow consumption of films, which is always like that's like most of the issue I have with like, the types of reviews that the Critical Drinker makes are kind of like the types of reviews that like Ben Shapiro makes, where it's like you're subjecting yourself to like very few films in a year. Like, of course you're going to be mad at them.
It's just in comparison to Ben Shapiro. I'm not sure. I don't know. That's an interesting comparison. It just kind of goes to show where his mind's at, what he's lumping Critical Drinker in with.
And
that's when do you feel the same way about, or did you say that you?
No, I concede he exposes himself to more films than I previously thought.
Like, you're not really going outside of your what is it called? Like your purview, your peripherals. You're not really like trying to experience the best films in a year. If all you're gonna,
I will say, I know this sounds a bit weird, but if you maybe feel there are particular movies that you've come across that you'd love to get more of a spotlight because you think they're incredible, I can of course pass them on.
Okay, so things that I think he would like.
Theoretically, yeah, but like if it's something that you're not even sure you would like, but you just think it's so fucking good it needs to be seen more, then I can, you can try it with him, sort of thing.
Okay.
And I think this is just, they're taking a break from analyzing this pretty controversial, not controversial. I guess it is controversial in the sense that it's criticizing the Critical Drinker, and they're friends with the Critical Drinker. But they take a break from all this video analysis and have just a person to person moment where Mahler's just like, yeah, I mean, you can just give me a couple like movies that you think are good that aren't getting enough attention, and I'll recommend them to the drinker, and maybe you can watch those, and that's a credit to how open-minded Mahler believes Critical Drinker is, that he can just recommend him movies and the drinker will watch them, and if he likes them, he'll give them attention. which I'm sure has happened in the past. I think they do reference movies that they've recommended to Drinker that he hasn't seen, and that he's ended up doing reviews on. And just shows that these guys are friends. That I don't know how else to put it. It does seem like the one thing I will say about the Efap guys is that they aren't afraid to, like, it seems like they do hang out a lot, and they do like enjoy each other's company. It's not just a business type relationship, although it is very professional, I would say. But it does seem like they do a lot outside of these videos. Like you'll hear them referring to having long conversations about it, or watching something with other people. Like you'll have Mahler come on a different stream and he'll say, "Oh yeah, we spent the weekend or whatever watching these movies together," and maybe they didn't do like a particular episode on it. So it's not just for work. They actually just hang out and have a good time. So Mahler feels very comfortable letting YMS know that if he does feel like there are some really good independent movies that he'd like to have a bigger platform, that he could recommend it to him, and Mahler would send the word to Drinker, and Drinker will review them, and if he thinks that they're worth it, then he might do a video on it, and that could help increase their popularity. I honestly think YMS should take him up on that, because it would be a good opportunity to build a good relationship with these guys. Sometimes recommending good movies to people is a good way to kind of to start a friendship, for lack of a better term. But I think that's a good place to kind of end it. We are 2 hours in. We're pausing at on the Efap video. We're pausing at 2 hours 16 minutes 47 seconds. I would love to keep going. I'm having a blast, but I also I do have some real world stuff that sucks me away right now, and I also I'm not an Efap guy. My brain does eventually turn to mush, and I feel like I miss out on making good points, or well, maybe I'm giving myself too credit. I miss out on making statements after their statements, mediocre statements. So I think it's probably a good time to take a break, and I hope you enjoyed part 3, and hopefully we can get back to it and dive more into this review. All right.